from Anshe Sfard Bethel Emeth Congregation. It's time to take 10 minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parashat Mishpatim, 2 Sinais. If we look in Parashat Mishpatim, find the famous words of Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. These words, though, actually appear in 3 places, in one form or another. They appear in Yitro, before the Jews get the 10 Commandments. It says, Na'aseh, that the Jews said, we will do. In this parsha, once they say, whatever, Kol Advarim Asher Diber Hashem Na'aseh, whatever Hashem says, we will do. And then a few verses later it says, whatever Hashem said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will listen and we will do. So what's the difference? The truth is that in many ways they're synonyms, to do or to listen, to obey. It's really sort of the same thing, but still, why the difference and why is it repeated here twice in close proximity and 3 times altogether? In order to understand that, we need to understand, as has been pointed out in my yeshiva, Yeshivat Har Tzion, that even as Moshe was contemplating the notion of standing at Mount Sinai, he referred to it, Paro and Hashem, Havdil, Elef Havdalos, referred to it in 2 different ways. There's Tavdun et Halokim, God's words to Moshe at the burning bush, that you will worship God at this mountain. Mount Sinai is for worship, whatever that means. And Paro repeats that idea, L'chu yivdu et Hashem kedaberchem, go worship God as you wish. Says that several times, yivdu et Hashem, go and worship God. L'chu yivdu et Hashem. But then sometimes Paro says, Zivchu l'elokechem ba'aretz. That what he wants them to do is to go worship God. As he says, Derech shlosh yamim nelech b'midbar, and we're going to go. And the concept is that perhaps they need to bring sacrifices, something to that effect. Moshe does not deny Pharaoh's notion that at Sinai they need sacrifices. After all, he needs to take the sheep, Moshe says. There are sacrifices there. So there's worship and there's sacrifices. Now if we look again at these psukim, these verses here in Mishpatim, we notice something interesting. We can cut the verses in 2. It's one little chapter, chapter 24. You can cut it in 2. And we land out with 2 different sections. First, Moshe tells the people all the words of God and the Mishpatim, the laws. This Parshat Mishpatim, the laws, all the various civil laws mentioned in this Parsha, and some other laws. And what do they respond? Na'aseh. They will do. So here, there's no sacrifice. There's just telling of laws, and they say they will do. This is reminiscent of Parshat Yitro. And even Rashi says that for this whole section, but perhaps one could suggest these verses are very reminiscent of the chapter 19 before they got to 10 Commandments, that there was no sacrifice, discussion of a covenant, but there's no sacrifice. And they said Na'aseh, they will do. Then Moshe writes down the words, and he builds all matzevot, the different types of pillars for the 12 tribes. He sends out the youngsters or the important people. He sends them out to bring offerings. They bring offerings. He sprinkles the blood. Here there are offerings. There's blood. He sprinkles the blood on the people, the blood on the altar, and the people. And what does he read? He reads the book of the covenant. Not the Mishpatim, the covenant. Could be it's the same thing, but here it's spoken of in terms of a brit, of a covenant. And they say Na'aseh and Nishma. There's a covenant which has blood, and there's then something else the Jews are to observe, which is just the words of the Mishpatim. If we ask ourselves, what does it mean to Tavdun et Halokim, that Hashem told Moshe they would worship God at Mount Sinai? What are they going to do there? Well, we have a midrash in this Sifrei that says that when it says in Parshat Mishpatim, Va'avadtem Hashem Elokeichem, earlier on it says, thou shalt worship God. It means two things. Avdehu b'Torato, Avdehu b'Mikdasho. We worship God through His Torah, the words of the Torah, and through His Mikdash, through His sanctuary. In Parshat Mishpatim, we worship God through His Torah. You know how you worship God? You study the laws. What happens when an ox gores another ox? What happens when a person falls in a pit that you dug? What happens when someone loses lost property? How do you treat a widow and an orphan? Those are the Mishpatim of Deu B'Torato. We worship God through the learning of laws. No sacrifices. And to this, the response is Naaseh. We'll do it. So laws, things to do, you do them. Then there's something, and that's a form of covenant as well. Here in Mishpatim, the word covenant's not used. In Yitro it is. And there's another covenant, and that is Avdehu b'Mikdasho, a worship of God which is more worshipful, which is more sacrificial, which is more temple-oriented. And here there are sacrifices. It's a word of covenant. The bris often is associated with blood, as in the bris milah. And there is blood, and that's Na'aseh v'Nishma. We will do, and we will also hear. We will listen. We will listen. The sacrifices it's a matter of when you make sacrifice and there's blood, reminiscent of the blood of Isaac was almost spilled on the altar. The willingness of a Jew to sacrifice. You have to listen. It's a matter of mishmat. It's a matter of not just doing, but it is more of an element of sacrifice, personal sacrifice, of discipline. There, that's the Naaseh and Nishma. We have then two elements. If we look at our parsha, we can say to ourselves, what is this? Bunch of laws, civil law. This is the Torah. This is the the great Ten Commandments, has deteriorated into an ox and a pit and an animal, a sheep and a cow and a bull. And the answer is, look at these two covenants. You know which one became a spiritual one where there was a revelation of God? There was a revelation of God at the end of the story through the various offerings, but there's also a covenant merely through the study of the laws. If we want to be indeed those who worship God, we have to, on the one hand, engage in Naaseh, just the practicalities of being an ethical individual. And yes, the cows and the pits and the lost objects. But if we want to have that spiritual experience, that's Avdehu b'Mikdasho. We have to also turn to the temple as well. And through this combination of law and ritual, law and sacrificial existence, give sacrificing of our lives and of ourselves, and also a prayerful life of worship. Through the combination of these, we indeed can enter the covenant. It's not easy. You can't get away with just one or the other. You can't just pray, show up in synagogue and pray in the morning and the evening and say you've done your job as a Jew. And you can't just study and say, that's enough. Together, Avdehu b'Torato, Avdehu b'Mikdasho, together, worship of the temple, the worship of Torah study and the laws themselves. Through this is the complete Judaism. And with this, the covenant will be complete. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sefard Beth Elameth congregation, here for our discussion of Parshat Mishpatim. Join us each week for our discussion of various parshiot, various holidays, and various aspects of Torah practices. Thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer, for producing today's show. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit ASBEE.org.